Aging on stem cell function, and how do you really fix the effect of aging and age stem cells and make them critical cardiac repair. So some fun facts for the heart to start off. We know that the heart begins beating at 4 weeks after conception and then does not stop until death. The average adult heart can beat about 72 times a minute, 100,000 times a day, 3.6 million times a year, and in total about 2.5 billion times during the lifetime. So you can imagine how much the heart works, and the total energy that it generates over the lifetime can be equivalent to driving to the moon and back. So basically the heart does a lot of work for us throughout the lifetime. And what do we do to the heart? This is what we do. We do not take care of what we eat, and do not regulate on what we consume. And in the end, it becomes detrimental to the heart and leads to something called as heart disease. So if you look at some of the demographics over the world, cardiac diseases is a huge problem, and in Pakistan as well, the percentage of cardiovascular diseases are on the rise. Cardiovascular disease is number one cause of mortality around the world. You can see here that about 17 million people get affected by cardiac diseases every year around the world, so it's a huge problem. And if you look at the distribution of how cardiac diseases affect both males and females, it pretty much is equivalent, and both females and males are equally affected by heart failure. The percentage of distribution of how cardiac diseases or heart failure affects us during age seems to be growing over the period of time, and now more and more people under the age of 65 get affected from cardiac diseases and heart failure. And this is, keep in mind, this data is like about 10 years old. So this percentage is increasing rapidly now. We do know that as you age, you get a higher incidence of heart failure and cardiac diseases, but the alarming fact is that under the age of 65, population is growing really fast. So when you get heart disease or heart failure, what are the current therapies or ways to treat cardiac diseases? And one of the things is to get monitoring and go to cardiac rehab. The doctor will encourage lifestyle changes, including what you eat, and encourage exercise. You will be prescribed a bunch of medications to regulate hypertension or associated disorders, beta blocker therapy, and statins, and so on and so forth. Depending on the extent of heart failure, there could be an implanted device here, such as the left ventricular assist devices or other devices to aid, again, cardiac function. And again, a surgical procedure to make the heart look better or function better. Or it could be a combination of all of these factors together to really treat or manage heart failure. But the bottom line is that whatever you do to the heart, once you get an ischemic event or damage to the heart, you can only slow down the progression of cardiac disease. You can never prevent heart failure that's going to happen over the period of time once the heart gets damaged or once you have an ischemic event. So the heart, basically, whatever you do, you cannot repair or regenerate the heart. You can only slow down the progression of the disease. So that's where regenerative medicine comes in. And if you look at some of the data for the amount of money being pumped into regenerative medicine in just the US over the last few years, you can appreciate here that The National Institute of Health, that is a government-funded agency, has spent billions of dollars here in regenerative medicine. At the same time, we have a lot of non-government agencies and funding available to conduct regenerative medicine and develop different approaches. So broadly, regenerative medicine covers a bunch of different things, and we know that it can have cell and gene therapy-based approaches, stem cells, embryonic as well as somatic cells, engineered tissue, and some devices, and at the same time some gene therapy, gene editing-based approaches where you can knock out various genes and deliver them to various damaged tissues. So why do we need regeneration, and what is the overall problem with in terms of the heart? And this here will kind of give you an idea of what is the overall issue with regeneration. So if you look at the regenerative capacity in the lower animals or invertebrates, such as fishes, there's a really high increase or high capacity for regeneration. But as you travel through the animal kingdom and you get into more and more developed and more advanced animals and mammals here, the regenerative capacity really declines. So there's no regeneration pretty much in mammals, and you can see here that if you take off or cut a limb from a salamander, the salamander is able to grow the exact same limb over again, and that would be the exact same function. So these animals have a lot of regenerative potential, but somehow mammals lose regeneration over the course of developing. So in terms of the heart, what we know is that the adult heart pretty much is non-regenerative organ, and if you get an injury to the adult heart, that injury is pretty much replaced by fibrosis and an increased cell death, which is associated with cardiomyocyte, adverse remodeling, and ultimately a scar in the heart that basically never goes away. So the adult heart cannot regenerate, cannot replace its lost cardiomyocytes, and the scar that ultimately develops in the heart will never ever go away during the lifetime of the patient. What is interesting though is that over the last, I think about 10 years or so, there's some really nice studies published which now show that in the postnatal tissue or the neonatal tissue, the mammalian heart has a regenerative potential. So, and this regenerative potential has been shown in the human heart. It has been shown in large animals, and we know that early on, just after you are born, you have a really high ability to regenerate the heart. And at that time, what happens is that if you take that heart, and there have been studies conducted that have shown that if you injure the heart at that point and in the neonatal stage, you get a complete resolution of the scar tissue. So the scar completely goes away at that point. So there's something really interesting going on in the heart and the neonatal stages, which leads to complete regeneration and resolution of the scar and cardiac function. So similarly, people have shown over the course of the last 5 years or so that the heart really does not, and the adult heart does not really have any new cardiomyocytes or turnover over the course of an individual's lifetime. And this was an interesting study that was done in patients who lived in the region of nuclear testing, which was being done in the 60s and 70s. And this study actually took some samples from postmortem samples from people who lived in those zones, and did some carbon dating experiments and serology-based assessment of how cell numbers vary over the course of a lifetime. And you can see here that the red line, which is cardiomyocytes, pretty much stay constant throughout the lifetime. So at 0 age to 80, the cell number or cardiomyocytes do not have any new cell or any increases in their number. Same thing here, the cell turnover does not change in the cardiomyocyte, and it is pretty much constant throughout the lifetime of the individual. So basically, the heart consists of a fixed number of cardiomyocytes that are defined at the time of birth, and that number is constant, it does not change throughout the lifetime. And this is basically the crux of the problem and why we get